So, if you're a coach or really any kind of business where you have to get people to do something in order to get a result, one of the big problems that a lot of folks run into is that they can't get their clients to actually do what they tell them to. And so you have this big result, like you've sold somebody into something, you've given them this promise and so whatever, but if they don't do the work, they can't get the result, but that ultimately ends up coming back on you. So today, we're going to walk through some of the psychology around why people don't do what we tell them to do and some actionable steps that you can do in order to fix it. So, before we get into the how to do it, we need to understand a little bit about how humans learn stuff. So, the funny thing about it is that we as humans like to think that we are these super complex creatures, but in reality, the way that we learn is no different than like a dog. And so, if there's something that's going on, there's only three ways that we can influence the way that somebody behaves. So, what we can do first is we can reward somebody's behavior, we can extinguish someone's behavior, and we can punish somebody's behavior. Obviously, rewarding is good, and extinguishing and punishing are bad. And so, to give you like a super extreme example to this, if I had my wife come home and she just got her nails done, if I didn't like the color of her nails and I wanted to punish her, I would probably be very visceral in my feedback on the nails. I'd be like, this is fucking awful. I hate these nails. You should never get these nails again. If you ever get these nails again, I will da 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 da. Right? Now, incredibly harsh, but will decrease the likelihood that when she goes and gets her nails done, she will get them done in that color, right? Again, super extreme example. Now, if you want a slightly less extreme example, you can go with extinguishing, right? And so this would look like if I didn't like the color of the nails, and so I just chose to not even acknowledge them, right? So obviously, not punishing, but still accomplishes the same goal of I don't like those nails, so I will not acknowledge them so that when she gets her nails done, it's less likely that she gets that color. And if I really like the nails and I want her to do it again, I will completely hype her up. I'll say, man, those are beautiful. I love those nails. You should really get those more. I would really love if you did that. You're so freaking attractive. Like all of these things. And so if I do that, it increases the likelihood that she will get those nails in that color. And so, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to reward people for the instructions that we give them. And so one of the things that we also have to take into consideration here are the ratio between how much it costs them to do a specific thing and then what reward they get back in return. What most business owners do, and especially coaches are bad about this, is they get a client on, they get them sold, they get payment, they do all this stuff, and then they're like, okay, we're going to completely start from scratch and redo everything. And it's the very first instruction that they give. And so what happens is that the guaranteed cost, like the time, the energy, the resource, like all the stuff that the client's going to have to put in is way up here. Super, super big ask that you've made. But their perceived likelihood of getting like the reward that they want may only be here. And so to give you a more meta example of this, when I was working for a real estate coach, he was teaching people how to basically wholesale real estate. So how to get, dilapidated properties, how to sell them to a cash buyer, and like the arbitrage opportunity between that. And so one of the things that he found was that he had a really hard time getting people to actually like generate leads. And so what we found is that he was getting people in, and the first task that he gave them was to go and drive around these low income neighborhoods for hours at a time and find these properties and like basically manually build this lease. So a super, super labor intensive like ask in order to get like maybe a lead that's willing to pursue and continue down the process. And so the struggle that he had is that he couldn't get people to actually do this because it was a huge ask and was like a ton of work, and he hadn't built up enough trust yet to actually get them to believe that this is worthwhile doing. And so obviously, by the nature of most of your services, you're going to have stuff like that. Like if I have to get somebody to totally rebuild their funnel, like that's just the thing that has to happen. But what I need to do is increase the likelihood that they actually get that to happen. So what I generally do is at the very beginning of the customer relationships, this is right after that they have actually bought something from you. What I like to do is find the inverse of this. So I want to find something that is very low cost, but is incredibly high in reward. So in my business, just to give you a bit of a meta example, one of the things that I look for are super simple things like changing headlines, putting things above the fold, or maybe even just like shifting like where an opt-in form is, right? Like something that somebody could do in like 5 minutes in like on a Zoom call while I'm sitting there with them. Because imagine it like this. If I imagine that I make an ask of you and I say, hey, did you know that if you just make this headline and just make the text smaller, that your button will be visible above the photo on mobile and your opt-in rate will go up? Well, if you do that really, really low effort thing and it doubles your opt-in rate, what do you think the likelihood is that they will follow the next set of instructions that I give them? Probably a lot higher. And so what I generally like to do, if I'm able to, is basically on this like ask ratio. For the cost, I like to start pretty low and then I like to slowly work my way up over time, because as I make these slightly bigger asks, if they continue to work, then this reputation kind of chains together. And so eventually I can be like, hey, we are going to build this totally new funnel. It involves building, 11 custom pages from scratch. You're going to have to build 7 new products for this tripwire. You're going to have to run totally new ads. You're going to have to do all the, like this massive mountain of work, and it's going to take us 30 days. Well, if I try to do that right at the beginning of the customer's like relationship with me, it's probably not going to work out super well. But if it's like 30 or 60 days later and I've chained together all of these good things that have happened, well, now this bigger one, they're going to be like, okay, well, every other time that he's told me to do something before, good things have happened. And so it's reasonable to assume that if I do this, that a good thing will happen as well. And so the action steps here is that you want to identify what this early low cost win is, because if you can figure out what this is in your business, like regardless of what it is, then it'll just increase the likelihood that people will follow the instructions that you give them over time as they get more and more complex.